All right, hello and welcome to Hello Governor the podcast. As always, I am Abdullah, and with me today is Joe Zieja. How you doing, Joe?
Hello, Governor.
First question is the obvious one. How did you get started and what made you want to get into voiceover?
Oh man. So this story has been told many, many, many times in many different places. I'll try to kind of like give you the short version. Not a typical origin story at all. I have no acting background. I have no acting training. I didn't go to school for it. I didn't start until I was 28. Let me think. 28 years old sounds about right. I was in the Air Force for most of my adult life and then transitioned to government contract work, but I was still a reservist. And one Saturday morning, I happened to be talking to a friend of mine uh, while I was on duty because there was nobody else in the office. And I was like, oh, I've always kind of wanted to try voice acting. And I'm thinking like anime, video games, cartoons, the fun stuff that everybody thinks about. And he's like, well, my company used to hire people for marketing videos on this website. Why don't you go check it out? And so I had some equipment, recording equipment from just being a hobbyist musician for years and years and years. So like I had a microphone that I actually had won in a songwriting competition that was like, I don't know, worth like $67 or something like that. And I went home, signed up, auditioned for something, and booked it immediately. And then like it just snowballed. For the next 8 months, I auditioned for absolutely everything I could find in every place. I made my own demos. I didn't have an agent. I didn't go take classes anywhere. I just kind of applied a brute force approach. And I'm in Virginia at the time, not in Los Angeles. And then after that, I basically quit my job because I was out earning my government salary. And the question became like, well, okay, what do I do now? And by that point, which was about, like I said, 8 to 10 months in, maybe a year in, I had gotten myself a manager to try to help me like navigate the industry because I had no idea what I was doing. And she said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I think I want to be in games and I want to be in cartoons. And she said, well, time to move to LA. So I moved to LA in 2015 after about 16 months of understanding that voice acting was a real job. And here I am.
So you've been doing this for 11 years now. That's crazy.
Yep, about 12, more like 12 years. I'd say like 12. I started in 2013, but I really wasn't doing it full time until the end of 20 or the beginning of 2014.
And what was your first acting credit? Like, what was the first official job you did?
The first official job I ever did was that job I booked that day, that Saturday afternoon on voices.com. And it was a cartoon panda speaking Arabic to children. Uh, it was kind of like a kid's, and I always forget whether or not it was teaching Arabic to English speaking children or English to Arabic speaking children, but it was super, super basic. I basically used the Arabic I learned in college. Very, very simple, like counting to 10, numbers, shapes, that kind of thing. So that was my very, very first acting job, was that job. Not a typical, like I keep saying, this is not a typical way to get into this career field.
I mean, it's not the worst acting credit I've heard on. I mean, it's not the worst, but it's not like the most glamorous thing in the
Nope,
world.
not glamorous at all. But and I think that people really have a bad conception about how precisely glamorous this industry is. I call it the voice acting iceberg. You only see 1% of it. You see the high profile Pixar movies and video games, but that's like 1% of the industry. There's so much more work to be done and money to be made underneath the surface in commercials and promos and e-learning and corporate and all these other things like that are not glam.
Yeah, yeah, but that stuff is not sexy to the average
Right.
person.
Correct.
So, because when you ask people like, "Oh, what do you do?" You do voiceover, they automatically think cartoons, anime, blah blah blah, but it's not just that. It's like e-learning and
It's lots of
industrial
things.
stuff, yeah. Yeah.
I keep track and I have done over 8,000 jobs in my career and only 180 of them made IMDb, right? So we're well under 10%.
And I know you get asked this a lot, so I'm gonna put my own spin on this one. When you got the role of Claude, what was that audition like?
That audition was, you know, fairly boring from a story perspective. I went in to the studio was called Cup of Tea, uh, run by some of my favorite people in the industry. And I really had not done a lot with them. I had done Fire Emblem Heroes a little while before, but otherwise, this is like 20. When did I audition? 2017, maybe ish. And so I'd only been in LA for like 2 years at that point, I think. I might be getting my time wrong, but the game came out in 2019, and I know I was working on it for at least a year. So let's say 2017, 2018 is when I auditioned. And I went in, and they handed me a book of characters, and they were like, I want you to do this one, and this one. I think I read for Claude, Dimitri, and I think Ferdinand. There may have been another one in there because I went in there and it was a rare moment where I actually went into a studio for an audition. Most of the time we auditioned from home. Um, but I didn't have a sense of like what it was at all. You know, you do dozens of auditions a week and you just kind of try to let them all go. The but I got an email and they were like, "Hey, you booked this thing in the next Fire Emblem." And I was like, "Oh, Fire Emblem's cool. I'm familiar with Fire Emblem. I played Awakening maybe, 2 years prior on like a whim because it was a series I had never played. They were like, "Oh, you booked the next Fire Emblem. Oh, okay, cool." It's like a kind of a niche RPG series that was sizable, but not like rabid. And I was like, "Can you tell me who I booked?" And they're like, "You booked Claude." And I was like, "Ooh." And I remember like being like, I think I just booked a lead in a Fire Emblem game. That's neat." Um, and that's how I booked the role. But I wasn't really sure, as I think a lot of people weren't really sure how big Three Houses is going to be. Because, like I said, Fire Emblem before Three Houses was kind of like a cute niche fandom, right? Like you play the like heroes, or you play Awakening, or you play whatever. Um, and I remember going in for a pickup session 6 months before the game was scheduled to come out. And I hadn't really paid attention to any news or anything regarding the game. And I was in the break room waiting to start the pickup session with Patrick Seitz, who is the director. And Patrick was like, "Hey, have you seen any of the Claude fan art?" And I was like, "Claude fan art? The game's not out yet. Who's drawing pictures of Claude?" And he goes, "Oh, you don't know." And that's the moment when I like understood when he started showing me that like this game had tremendous momentum and this fandom had tremendous momentum. And that's when I was like, "Oh, we've got something big here." Um, so that's kind of how the audition job sequence went.
That's interesting that that you went into studio to audition for something because that's like I don't think I've ever heard of an actor being like, "Oh, I went to the studio to do this thing to audition for something."
That obviously was the standard for decades and decades and decades until the 2010-ish era. And when I moved to LA in 2015, I would still occasionally be called into studio to audition, but most of the time it was into my agent's office to audition and not directly into the studio itself. By 2017, when I auditioned for Claude, I was never going in, really almost never.
And what are some of your favorite Claude lines or moments?
I mean, he's got some great ones. It's been so long since we recorded at this point, but uh, the one that everybody remembers he didn't actually say, which is "Fear the deer." That was kind of like something that like me and the fans kind of came up with, but he never says it. In one of the Heroes versions of him, I want to say maybe his Brave version, they ended up putting it in for me. So I think there's somewhere in the Hero version where Claude does say "Fear the deer," but I can't remember where it is. I should ask. Um, Never underestimate an outsider is great. Uh, I'm the grandson of the grandson of the grandson of the elite Riegan is top tier line for Claude, but he's got some good ones.
And do you watch or play any of the stuff you're in, or can you not stand listening to yourself?
I don't mind listening to myself, unless I like wasn't happy with the project, in which case I probably wouldn't be playing it anyway. I have to. I do occasionally play games and watch shows that I'm in, but I would say it's fairly rare. I used to stream games that I was in. That was kind of like my streaming shtick. Was here's a game I'm in, I'm going to play it, and I did that because I've been a gamer my whole life. When you're acting in a game, it poisons the experience a little bit, right? I can't go into a game with like beginner eyes. I can't experience it raw, so it's ruined a little bit. And so I thought maybe I can reclaim some of that experience by playing it like with fans. And so that's kind of what I did. Is I started to play games live and kind of talk through them, and that was a way for me to kind of like experience the games. But for the most part, like I won't boot up by myself a game that I'm in and play it. I kind of feel like the experience kind of got ruined a little bit by being in the game, and that's a price we pay, and that's okay.
So it's one of those things where it's like I'm fine with it, but I need someone with me, otherwise I'll get distracted by it.
It's not so much distracted. It's just like I feel like I've already had the experience, and I don't necessarily want to experience it again unless I add some other flavor to it. The other, like, for example, I don't often watch shows I'm in either, but I did get all the cast of Fate Apocrypha together at my house to have like a big party, and we all watched it together. And that became like a community experience. It wasn't like I'm going to sit down and watch anime and I'm in it. It was like let's get together and celebrate this project.
And speaking of anime, how did you take to dubbing? Was it easy or was it hard?
Dubbing is dubbing is a complicated subject for a bunch of different reasons. Dubbing is hard from a technical perspective in that you need to be very good with timing. If you don't have a sense of like what 2 seconds feels like, you'll have a difficult time as a dubber. Or at the very least, if you can't hear something and then match its length, you'll have a very difficult time as a dubber. Dubbing can be easy because it's so quick and there's not a lot of emphasis placed on how good the acting has to be. Because you are so focused on timing, the localization process is so specific. Sometimes you're rewriting things on the fly. You don't have a lot of time. Sometimes you're doing several episodes at once. So it becomes more about like how fast can you produce this dub than how good can the dub be. Which is one of the reasons that mostly back in like 2020, I kind of broke up with dubbing. You'll see I don't have a lot of anime credits beyond that because it was technically difficult. It is very low pay. I mean, very low pay for it when you compare it to the rest of the voice acting industry, and often could wreck your voice, right? So it was like I couldn't clog up my calendar for a low paying, stressful job, even though I loved it. Lately, I have been getting back into anime because I've really kind of been pruning my career a little bit and really doing projects that I'm more interested in and turning down a lot more work. And so I have a little bit more room for it. And that's been kind of nice to dabble back into it with things like Suzume and 100 meters and stuff like that.
And when you're dubbing, do you look at the script or screen?
You have to go back and forth. It depends on the kind of line, right? So if you can memorize 8 words, I always look at the screen because I need to see the lip flaps go as I talk and make sure I hit the beats. But there's sometimes where your character gives like a big long monologue and you're not going to memorize that. You don't have the script beforehand. You don't have the opportunity to even glance it over for the most part. I try to pull the words off the page, put them in my head, kind of load them in a queue, and then I'll watch the dub or the original.
And was there ever a point where you gave a take and the director said like, gotta do it again because the lip flaps didn't match?
Every take of every session. I mean, like that's dubbing. It's a grind because, and it also depends on like who your director is and whether or not they care. You could have some director that's like extremely anal retentive about lip flaps, and like you'll do something 5 or 6 times and you're like, man, it looks fine, we gotta move on. And then like your performance begins to degrade each time you do that, and so eventually you get this stilted flat performance, but it fits. And then you have other directors that are like, screw the flaps, no one cares about this, right? Like and then you can focus on the performance. So there's a lot of different dynamics that goes into any one dubbing session.
And out of all the characters you voiced, which one would you say was the toughest?
Toughest how?
I mean, just in general, like, whether it be vocal stress or just like getting in the mindset of that character was difficult for whatever reason.
Um, I did an episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where I chose a voice that I shouldn't have. It was really like a rookie mistake. I went into a JoJo's episode and picked something that was very rough and gravelly, which is difficult for me. That's not my natural way to go. You have folks like Fred Tatasciore and JB Blanc and Steve Bloom who can add that grit and not hurt themselves. But my voice is relatively smooth. And so I went in there and did this whole episode, and it was like 3 hours of screaming. It was fun and funny, but I couldn't work for a couple days afterwards. And I very rarely hurt myself that much, but that's probably one of the sessions that was the most difficult vocally.
And how do you avoid vocal damage?
You need to advocate for yourself, as in tell the director when you are approaching your limit. You need to not audition in voices that you are not willing to sustain for that session. So if I have a video game audition, I'm only sending them 5 lines. I could do anything for 5 lines, but I have to think ahead and say, can I do this voice for the full session, or am I going to hurt myself? So set yourself up for success, advocate and talk with your director, and don't push past the point of injury. Like when you're getting tired, stop, shut up, stop talking. That's basically how I protect myself.
And how did you get involved in Marvel Rivals?
Super simple, actually. I just got an audition from a studio and I sent it in and they booked me. That game was odd because even after I like did the first couple of sessions, I wasn't really sure like what the heck it was. I knew I was Bruce Banner, but I didn't quite get the whole competitive team shooter thing until about a year and a half after I started. I've been recording that game since like 2021. That was my first session. It was just like little drips and drops over the course of the 4 years until it came out. But very plain Jane on that one. Got an audition from my agent, sent in the MB3, and they booked me. It was just very, very streamlined.
And was Banner the only character you auditioned for, or were there other characters?
I have auditioned for other characters before and since. However, like once you book a lead in a game, it's unlikely that unless you're doing something very different. Banner is very close to my normal voice. All he does is kind of get a little nasally and a little more erudite. So it's unlikely that I'll play another character unless they want something that's very different, that I can really disguise who I am.
And what are some of your favorite Banner lines?
I like science can solve this. That's my favorite one.
And when you got the role of Banner, did you go back and listen to any previous incarnations of the character, or did you go in and do your own thing?
Nope. This is something that I actually just taught a whole section on in one of my parts of my my online school for voice actors, was the idea of the baton pass, right? Like you have a legacy character that you're grabbing onto, and you always sort of have to make the decision between 2 points. Number one, is this a voice match? Do they want this to sound like Banner? And number two, is this like a new interpretation? Number one, Banner's interesting because like no one can tell me what Banner sounds like. He's not a character that has like the distinct voice. Like you can think about Mark Ruffalo in the movies, that's probably the closest anybody gets to like a voice. And it was super clear from the beginning that they didn't want it to sound like any other particular Banner. They were like, we want him to sound a little bit like a dork. And I was like, okay. And so I focused not at all on where Banner came from. This is like an entirely new interpretation.
And have you gotten a chance to meet Fred Tatasciore in person?
Sure, plenty of times. Fred is like one of the nicest guys I've ever met in the industry. He's just so sweet and kind. I have to say, I probably met him less than 2 years after I got to LA in different functions, and we've always kind of run in the same circles. We did a Walla session together not too long ago. And so we're always kind of running into each other. Really just phenomenally nice guy, like just a very warm-hearted dude, which is great when you put him against the fact that like he's the Hulk in everything. It's so opposite of who he is in real life.
And that's what I like about your take on banners. Like it's so different than previous incarnations, and it's very nerdy. So when he switches over to Hulk, it's
The
you hear
contrast is big.
yeah. Speaking of legacy characters, you were also the voice of Bumblebee in Transformers: War for Cybertron. How did that whole thing come about?
Again, really simple, like got an audition from my agent and then jumped in and booked the job. As like that's 99% of all voice acting roles. Occasionally you might have like an interesting story about how I got this, but most of the time it's just you just get an agent, you get an audition from your agent or some other source of auditions and you do it. Bumblebee was interesting because they wanted such a dramatic departure from who Bumblebee normally is perceived as, which is like you're bubbly, ready to help, tiny little Autobot, like about the size of a human, ready to jump in and help out and save the world. The Bumblebee that they wrote in War for Cybertron was a gun runner, like a jaded weapons dealer who hated both the Decepticons and the Autobots and thought they were both out of their minds and didn't want to join either. At the beginning of the series, he's not an Autobot. He does not have an Autobot symbol on his chest. And he challenges Optimus Prime a lot and says, you guys, you're basically all zealots. You're going to get everybody killed. And so it was neat to play like, I could immediately, like, there was no reason at all for me to study any other Bumblebee. It was very different. Like, show me another series where Bumblebee is a gun runner, right? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So I studied not at all other roles for that. And I just kind of went in and gave my version of what a jaded gun runner felt like.
Because it's very different from like you said, it's very different from previous incarnations, and very controversial take on the character, and but I thought you did a great job, and I kind of wish that it's a role you would reprise down the line, hopefully. I don't
Thanks.
know.
I've actually reprised Bumblebee about 3 or 4 times since then in different properties. And it's interesting because in each of those reprisals, they've brought me back into the happy-go-lucky Autobot. I've done a couple of VR games. I did the video game Transformers Earthspark, and I think that's it so far. But I've been in behind Bumblebee's eyes in like 3 or 4 different properties now. War for Cybertron being the biggest one of them for sure. But yeah.
And have you gotten a chance to meet any of your fellow Transformers castmates from that show?
We actually all got together at the year that War for Cybertron came out. We all were at TFCon Los Angeles, and so we did a big panel together. I had known some of them prior, like Bill Rogers and I had worked on other projects together. Yeah, I had already known some of them, but I did get to hang out a little bit at the one con.
Did it feel surreal, like being like the voice of an existing character and having people come up to you and be like, hey, you're Bumblebee?
It is pretty cool. That kind of like magic really never wears off.
And another franchise you were a part of was Digimon. What was that audition like?
Pretty much the same story, man. You get an audition, you send it back, you book a job. There's really not a lot of whiz bang as far as auditioning in this industry goes. And I remember the unique thing about that job was I'm not super familiar with Digimon, so pretty much everybody outside of the franchise, you know, it's just this conflagration of Pokemon and Digimon where they're basically the same thing with 2 different names. But I found out pretty quickly during the sessions that like that was not the case. And Digimon Time Stranger was like kind of a depressing story. Like it had a lot of dark elements in it. Like it smacks of like it deals with themes of like genocide. Like it's really quite dark for what you perceive as like a Pokemon adjacent property. And so that was kind of my education about Digimon, and he was a fun character to play.
Yeah, because I remember seeing footage of that game at a con and being like, "Huh, this is like, this seems way too dark for a cutesy,
It is dark.
cutesy game."
It was dark.
No, but that must be fun, like playing those types of characters, like being involved in something, and you think it's going to be one thing, and then it turns out to be it's a totally different thing
We are
altogether.
always flowing and changing, and yeah, it's we're always adapting.
And what was the best and worst piece of advice you've ever been given as an actor?
Huh. The best, I mean, I've been given a lot of like good pieces of advice, and I've been given a lot of bad pieces of advice over my life. So I'm trying to pick out like which one do I think is like the best and the worst. One of the pieces of advice that I have, it's actually like I have it in my booth on the wall, was given to me by a kind of old guard voice actor who's huge in animation named Pat Fraley. Pat Fraley has done a lot of things, and he was one of the first people when I moved to LA. I think I did one of his, Saturday morning workshops or something like that. And he didn't like frame it as like this big piece of advice, but he said, you go into the booth, they're already not hiring you. And it was like his way of saying, why aren't you taking risks in there? Like, why aren't you playing? They're already not hiring you. The worst thing that can happen is they still don't hire you. Like, you're not going to move down. So they're already not hiring you is a phrase that now, like, I teach my students about, like, what are you so worried about in there? Like, take a risk, make a choice, make a strong choice. They're already not hiring you. So that's probably one of the best pieces of acting advice I've ever gotten. One of the worst pieces of advice I've ever gotten is a piece of advice that gets distributed all the time. And I actually just talked a student off the ledge at a convention I was at because another actor had just given him the advice, drop everything and move to LA. That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard in my life. You should never put yourself and your family in dire financial straits so you can move to the most expensive city in the country and try to get into an industry that is very difficult to get into. The whole selling the idea that like I'm going to move to Hollywood with a dime in my pocket and a dream in my heart is horrible advice and irresponsible, I think, to give to pretty much anybody. There's a lot of steps that need to be taken before you can take that big of a risk. There are people out there for whom that level of desperation is a good motivator, but I think they're much, 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 much smaller percent of the population than we think they are. I think you should establish yourself in wherever you are, have good savings, have good backup plans, have all that stuff settled, because if you go into an audition desperate for that job, you look like you're desperate for the job. You walk into an audition, you need it badly, you're just a suck up who wants a paycheck. You're not an actor. The best way to come off like you don't need the job is to not need the job. And you can do that by not beggaring yourself so that you can chase a dream. Be smart. That's the worst piece of advice that I hear people give.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be smart. I mean, if you're going to take that leap of faith, you got to be smart about it. Otherwise, you're going to hit the pavement.
Yep.
But you mentioned you do classes as well. So I'm kind of
Mhm.
wondering, like, what made you want to pursue that?
I think some of it stemmed from kind of the conversation I was just having about having bad acting advice. As I alluded to at the beginning of this interview, I did not come up through the ranks in this traditional old guard kind of way. And I found that so many people who I talked to had these mythological views about the industry that like, oh, I have to go to UCLA, I have to get $150,000, $500,000 theater degree, and then I need to go bus tables, and then I need to do student projects, and then I need to beg my way to the top, and I have to work for exposure, and like I need $1 million studio. All these things kind of came to a head, and I had a friend of mine who was like, "Hey, you should coach," and I was like, "I don't have time to coach, and I don't know that I like the coaching model for beginners." And so I was like, "Well, what can I do as an entry point that sort of democratizes the idea of voice acting so that people could enter the market in a low risk, low stress way that empowered them to take control of their career instead of ceding that control to coaches and agents and gatekeepers, right?" And so I came up with what essentially became learnvoiceacting.com, the main course of which is called the Voice Acting Academy, which is essentially VO 101. And this VO 101 program can deliver a foundational education of the industry in a way that's equitable and accessible no matter where you are, and doesn't require you to find a coach and spend $200 an hour to learn how to read a specific script before you have any sense of business acumen or marketing or anything like that. So the idea was like, can I put together a comprehensive baseline form of education from which students can then jump off if they want to continue to pursue it? And if they don't want to continue to pursue it, great. You've invested a minimal amount of money into a curiosity. You've satisfied that curiosity, and you're better for it, and you go move on with your life. And so that's kind of how I came up with the structure that became learnvoiceacting.com. And it just kind of exploded. And I found people, like completed the program and wanted more, and they wanted more specifics. And they, once they were ready for the one-on-one training, they wanted to go someplace to practice and learn and all that stuff. So now it's kind of become very much like a university setting where we have like our 101 course, and then we have 201 courses and niche courses, and we have places to practice where you're getting consistent scripts, and then we have higher level programs that are more doctorate-esque, like a year-long program where you can really get intensive and start talking about making like more professional demos and stuff like that. But it all came out of the genesis of like so many people asking me that question: how do I get into this industry? And also hearing so many wrong answers about how to get into this industry from people that built their career in 1980 and we're like, well, you got to move to Los Angeles, join the union, and then that's just not that's not our industry anymore. That was the industry, but it's not. And so that's where my kind of online university kind of came about.
And how do you balance your work and personal life?
At times I don't, and the thing that I teach a lot of students about the business that we're in, and we're in a business, right? Like we are artists, yes, and actors, but if you want to make money, it's business. We give up the stability of the 9 to 5, right? The 9 to 5 grind guarantees us income and steady work with, volatility aside. We give that up. And one of the things that we have to do in exchange for that is occasionally we sprint, right? We're working really hard for a short period of time. I call those like sprints in your business. But very much like a real sprint on the track, you don't sprint unless you can see the finish line. So unless you have a contained goal, something that you're going to reach, you got to pace yourself. And I learned that the hard way over many, many years. I began hiring staff for various things in like 2017-ish. And when I built learnvoiceacting.com, I made sure that after I bootstrapped it myself for like the first year, I started hiring people to start taking over stuff that didn't necessarily need to be done by me. So it's been a process. There have been weeks where, in the past, I worked for 12 hours a day, every day. And that sucked. And I didn't want to do that anymore. And I tried to figure out how to not do that. And now, as my companies are mature, I am trying to figure out, okay, if this doesn't require me physically, how do I give it to somebody else? And that's been kind of like delegation has been my new my new thing.
And outside of voiceover and teaching classes, do you have any personal hobbies?
Yeah, I collect hobbies like, you collect wildflowers on a hike. I do lots and lots of different things. I love a panoply of experiences from scuba diving. I learned how to fly a plane at some point. I'm a musician. I write books. I read books. I play video games. I hang out with my kids and my wife, and we'll play board games or go on hikes or take the dog on a hike. Or I love traveling as much as I possibly can. I like to get around the world and around the country and meet different people, and especially eat different foods. I love cooking. I'm the chef in the house, so I basically make dinner from scratch every night. And so yeah, I have no shortage of hobbies.
Man, that's amazing to that you know how to fly a plane.
It's a dangerous hobby that I don't know I necessarily recommend to anybody, and I mostly gave it up, but it was fun to learn.
You're like the second person who's worked on a Transformers thing that was a pilot, because I know Frank Welker's a pilot, so there you go.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, crazy. Crazy how life works
Yep.
sometimes.
Yep, yep.
Um, and speaking of like, traveling, have you considered like doing overseas cons?
Oh, I've done a couple. I've been to cons in the UK, Canada twice, and New Zealand once. And yeah, I'm always happy to go overseas. I love traveling.
What was your favorite place to travel to?
Like in my life or for a con?
I mean, just in general, because it's a
I
big
mean,
world.
okay, so let's put this in context, right? As I mentioned, I'm ex-military. And at one point I was stationed in Germany for about 3 years. So when I say I've traveled, I've been to damn near 40 countries, I think, at this point in my life, all across Europe. Been to Japan a bunch, like I said, New Zealand and all over the place. I worked for a while in Israel, and I've been to Turkey. Like I've really, really been all over the place. My favorite places that I've been to would probably be a mix of Japan. I've been there 3 times, and I loved that experience. New Zealand was a fantastic trip. Working in Israel was complicated, but it was an interesting, enriching trip. Um, and I really enjoyed. I spent like a week in Ireland. I really enjoyed it there. But like, it's really hard for me to pick. It depends on what you're going for, right? You don't go to major like your experience in New York City can't be translated to your experience in the Tuscan countryside. So it's really hard to pick.
So you've pretty much seen it all at this point. Like I can't imagine like you being somewhere and being like, "Oh, this is like a foreign concept to me. I don't know what this is."
I'm nowhere near there. I mean, like life is so big that you'll never experience everything, and if you're not learning, you're dying. So I hope to always say, "Wow, I've never experienced this before" for the rest of my life.
And you also mentioned that you've done cons as well. Like, what made you want to do that? Because I know that's a whole like other part of the business that some people are iffy on. Some people are like they do rely on that for their income, while others are like, "Ah, I don't want to do this because I think like paying me money to sign my name on a scribble, to sign my name on a picture is just like whatever." So where do you stand on that?
I keep cons at a little bit of a distance, but I enjoy them for different reasons. Cons are very greedy when it comes to your schedule, right? So like if you dive in, like my friend Zach Aguilar, right? Like that dude is traveling, he's on a plane like 80 times a year. That's too much, right? Like I got 2 kids. I'm not doing that. Like, right? I'm not, it has to be like giving up a weekend is a tough sell for me as a dad and just someone who enjoys leisure time. So I am fairly selective about where I go and how much time I spend there. I don't pursue conventions aggressively, and my schedule mostly reflects that. I think I have maybe 4 cons this year coming up, and I'm fairly happy with that. Like I probably won't pursue anymore just because of the amount of time it takes. But being at conventions, you get to interact with fans on a completely different level. And uh, there are often just really interesting stories that you'll get from fans about what the impact of your work was on them. And I think that's really valuable for creators in general. It's something that we don't get, especially in this, digital age, is I don't know how my characters actually impact people or how a performance actually impacted people. And so going to conventions is a great way to connect with that person to person value assessment of storytelling, which is really interesting to me. At the same time, cons can be very, very overwhelming. I mean, like it's you're on for the entire time you're there, and some people have that boundless performative energy. I am a little bit more of an introvert, where I'm happy to do it. I'm fairly socially adept, I think, but I need rest. Like I can't like doing that for a couple days. I come away pretty exhausted.
Especially when it's a long line and you look at the line of people and you're like, oh boy, I gotta talk to all these people.
Not even just like I have to talk to these people. It's like I have to make sure to give them my undivided attention for a period of time that will allow everyone to get through the line and still feel satisfied with the experience. Because the last thing you want is for someone to come up to your table and feel like they were dismissed because they've got to get the next person there. So it's a very delicate balance of attentiveness and to the person in front of you and also to what's ahead of you.
Yeah, yeah, that's why like I try my best to like, whenever I'm in line, I have to make sure like, is the line really long? If it's not, I can take my time, but if it is, I'm like, okay, I gotta like get my stuff in and go quick.
Yeah.
And another thing I want to talk about real quick, you did the voice of Star Fox and Star
Mhm.
Fox, I think Zero was it?
It
And
was Star Fox Zero: The Battle Begins, which was actually a mini movie that Nintendo did.
Yeah, and that's kind of weird because I remember when I first discovered your work and it's like it was like, oh, you voiced Star Fox in this thing, and I'm like, what is this thing? I've never heard of it.
Yeah,
But what was that experience like?
that was really cool because it was almost immediately after I landed in Los Angeles. Like I was here for like 3 months, uh, and I remember getting an NDA in my inbox and looking at it and going, "Why does this say Nintendo of America? I am absolutely nobody. Like I just got here." And so I sign it and I send it back and I go, "Who am I playing?" And they go, "You're playing Fox McCloud." And I actually jumped up off the couch and I was like, "What? What the hell? Why?" Right? Like, where did this come from? Like, Fox has an established voice. Why are like so? It was a very strange, quick project that they pulled that was totally different from the franchise games. And then Star Fox just like poofed into the ether. Like that was it. That was all anybody has heard of Star Fox in 2016. That's the last time we heard a peep about Fox McCloud or anybody else. So we're all kind of waiting with bated breath. But it was fun to work with Nintendo. There was a whole Nintendo crew at the session, um, which I didn't expect, and it was a lot of fun.
That's crazy to me. That's like you just landed in LA and you get this email. I was like, hey, you got this project from Nintendo,
Yeah,
and
it
it's
was
like,
odd.
oh man, that's hilarious. I don't know why that's funny to me. It's like, oh, we need you for this Nintendo thing. It's like, what? Is this real?
Yeah.
And what are your plans for the future?
Well, tonight I'm going to make a creamy chicken risotto with sun-dried tomatoes, and that's about as far as I'm looking. I'm excited for dinner. I think it's gonna be a good dinner, and I'm excited to eat it and make it. Uh, I am kind of moving into a time where I feel like I want to hustle less and I want to experience more. So I want to be making a lot more time in my life for things that are not necessarily productive. I have essentially two companies, one that I run as an actor, and one that I run as a teacher and businessman. And my goal is to put those on autopilot as much as I can, focus on the creativity aspects of them that can only come from me, and then focus on whatever takes me, whether that's travel or diving back into music or I think I'd probably like to write another book this year. I haven't written any novels in a while, and I would like to stop hustling and start really just steeping myself in the richness of experience that life can bring to you if you stop and allow it to.
Oh yeah, I also wanted to ask, like, thank you for mentioning that you wrote a book because I also wanted to ask, like, how long have you been
Oh yeah.
writing?
I actually have been writing my whole life. I wrote my first novel when I was like 17. It was horrifically derivative, um, as all 17-year-old novels are for the most part. And when I was in the military, I had this delusion that I was going to, like, my book writing career was the thing that was going to kick me out of government service. I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. I felt trapped in it, but I was good at it and the career was good. So I was there because it was stable, right? Like I was talking about establishing stability. I wasn't going to quit my job and write books. That's stupid. Um, Without any, good prospects. So I was like continually trying to publish books and publish books. And by the time 2012 came around, I had an agent lined up. I had several manuscripts written, but nobody had purchased a book of mine yet. And then bizarrely, voice acting took off long before, not long before, but almost simultaneously with the writing career having some prospects. And so in 20, when did I sell my first book? 2015, I put ink to paper on the sale of my rights of my first novel to Simon and Schuster. It was a 3-book deal, and yeah, I had basically them all written, and the idea was that they were going to come out in pretty quick order. Uh, the publishing industry is archaic and difficult and not kind to new authors. So basically, what happened is publishing ruined my taste for writing, and I sold my 3 books. I looked at like, wow, look at all the effort it took me to write and sell 3 books, or look at my voice acting career, and I just went all in on VO, and I haven't really written anything since. I think that streak will end probably this year, and I'll go back to writing, but I'm not sure where I want to put that creative energy. I adore writing and I enjoy reading books. It's the publishing part that's tough. It's all the marketing, it's all um, the politics that can be difficult for an author to navigate. Now, as opposed to 10 years ago when I published, I'm in a much different place in many ways. So maybe I'll have an easier time, but we'll see. I like writing. It just didn't have a place in my life for a little while.
I'm glad that you found, hopefully you'll find your love for that again because
Mm,
we need more writers now more than ever, in my opinion.
sure, that's damn sure.
And before I wrap this up, because I know that we're getting on time here, and I don't want to keep you on longer than I should,
Sure.
but before I wrap this up, can you give us an update on what you're currently working on and where can people find you online?
I mean, there's not a lot of Joe Ziejas out there. So it's either joezieja.com for all the actor stuff or learnvoiceacting.com for all the educational stuff. There's lots of stuff that I provide that doesn't cost you any money from an educational perspective. So make sure you're checking out, like I have some free classes, some free videos. My YouTube channel, I'm always pumping out content where it's just a little bite-sized um, topics on VO or analyzing voice acting performances from like an actor's perspective. So that's it. joezieja.com and learnvoiceacting.com is where you can find me and what I'm working on pretty much all the time.
Thank you so much for taking the time off to do this. This has been a wonderful conversation, and if you ever want to come back, you know where to find me.
Thanks, Abdullah. I really appreciate you having me on.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
So long.